Talk Radio for expert guidance, real answers, and inspiration to help you be the positive influence in your child's life. Got questions? We've got answers. Learn more and connect with Carol at BeYourInfluence.love. Parenting isn't just a journey, it's a lifelong learning experience.
Want a speaker who can inspire your audience and keep them laughing and learning all in the same moment? I'm Erica Gummany, and that's exactly what I hope to do when blending personal stories, deeper spiritual insights, and practical wisdom with a whole lot of humor that keeps everyone engaged. My intention is to create safe, transformative spaces where real growth and connection happen. Book me to speak or facilitate something amazing at yourpivotalpoint.com.
Are you ready to awaken the wisdom that's already within you? Join Shakti Botazzi on Soul Wisdom Project, Remembering the Living Blueprint of the Soul, where spirituality meets real life. Tune in every first and third Tuesday each month at 9 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio to open a doorway to healing and embodied purpose, helping you move from self-doubt to self-love and from confusion to clarity. Explore more at theawakenedpath.com.
Living a life by design.
Welcome to Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living. Join me, Chris.
And me, Jacqueline, for real conversations about life, death, and everything in between.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and heal. How to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Through healthy conversations between the feminine and masculine, you learn how to harness the power of relationship and the mirror to befriend your shadow and to trust that any obstacle that gets in your way is there to help you grow.
Together, working at a practical level, you learn to trust that everything that is happening is for you, your growth, and ultimate freedom.
Our circumstances don't matter. It's only how we relate to them that does.
Get ready to befriend the wisdom of your body and the power of your mind.
Break Free and Trust starts now.
Hey, and welcome to Break Free and Trust, to Redesign for Living. I'm Chris.
And I'm Jacqueline.
And I'm going to kick us off in this episode with a quote from Alan Watts. And I can't do his accent, so just imagine me doing this in an Alan Watts voice. There is a peculiar suffering that comes with awareness, a kind of exile that happens not when you leave the world, but when you truly see it. You sit down to watch a movie everyone loves, and within minutes you're analyzing the manipulation tactics, the propaganda, the tired formulas. You're at a party, and instead of enjoying the moment, you're observing the social performance, the masks, the desperate need for validation in every conversation. You used to enjoy these things, but something changed. You woke up and you can't go back to sleep. Alan Watts. So today we are exploring one of the most painful consequences of an expanded consciousness, the simple loss of pleasure. Jacqueline and I share our own experiences and understanding on the topic of coming into higher consciousness, also known as dying to be alive. And for live viewers, of course, the show is open to questions in the second half, so write them in the chat, or you can call in at 1-800-930-2819. And maybe we'll start it off like I just read that quote, and you know, in a sense, Jacqueline, you're going through it right now.
Who am I ever?
Yeah. Where do you want to start with it?
Well, I think what I would start off by saying is growth ain't all it's cut out to be. It's painful.
Yeah.
And it kind of takes you by surprise.
Yeah. So more than loss of pet pleasure, painful.
Yeah. I mean, I was listening to you as you were saying that, and I don't really identify. I do identify in some ways with the loss of pleasure. I think it's way more than that. And the dying to be alive piece really resonates strongly. You know, I think it's interesting. We've talked a lot about your awakening process, and you know, a lot in the beginning we talked a lot about how you were brought to your knees and how you always do things really big. Go big or go home. The awakening process is really different when life hasn't handed you something that all of a sudden brought you to your knees, or you haven't created a scenario where you're brought to your knees, but rather my experience has been this slow unwinding or this slow undoing. And then all of a sudden, over the last 6 weeks, I'd say, it's been a really quick unraveling. And it's when I'm choosing. But I'm definitely not choosing the way it's feeling.
Right.
And finding some real resistance in it.
Yeah, as you point out, there's no one thing like a death or an addiction or something that you put the pin in and say, aha, there it is.
No.
What do you mean by a slow unwinding? Because it's now sped up. So what was the slow part like, just so I understand, our listeners understand?
You know, I think, like many of you, I've spent a lot of my life sort of in this world and learning and growing and having growing pains along the way and having sort of watching layers of the onion, if you will, or as I like to say, the artichoke, because at the center of the artichoke, there's not just tears, there's the heart of everything. Peel away. And that's manageable. That creates some challenge for sure, but it's manageable. And then all of a sudden it feels like layer upon layer upon layer upon layer are all falling away at the same time without me really being mentally prepared for what that looks like. And I would describe we went for a walk a couple of days ago and I was sharing how I was feeling with Chris, which I'm more than happy to share with all of you. But he decided to tell me his story of the caterpillar. And it's a story we all know, but it's one that was pretty profound in that moment for me because I identified myself somewhere very different than I had identified myself before. So I think maybe a great way for us to continue the conversation is for you to enter storyteller mode and we can go from there. What do you think?
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. This is the story of metamorphosis of the caterpillar. And it's actually something I tell, almost all my transformational coaching clients, because we all relate to it. When you hear it this way, we can really identify where we are in it. So it starts with a big juicy caterpillar, climbing around leaves and munching leaves and eating leaves and, just filling his belly or her belly every single day, whether it's raining or sunshine, happy as can be, munching leaves and looking around all around this caterpillar, sees other caterpillars just munching leaves. Everybody's happy. It's wonderful. Can't imagine anything being more wonderful than a caterpillar on a leaf munching leaves. There's nothing else to the world. That's it. And then something happens one day. One day, out of nowhere, the caterpillar does not feel hungry, does not want to munch leaves, nor can munch leaves. It has no idea what's happening. Looking around, all the other caterpillars are still munching leaves. They're still enjoying themselves and nothing's changed with them, but the caterpillar just can't eat. And days go by and the caterpillar just feels completely lost and feels like it's just all coming to an end. And in this sadness and in this depression, this structure starts growing around the caterpillar, which is this cocoon. And the caterpillar will think that's it. Well, this is the end. This is what death is. And so the cocoon wraps around the caterpillar, and slowly but surely, the caterpillar turns into a goo. It's like a primordial goo, just liquid. But it's something, the strangest thing is still happening. The consciousness is still there. The caterpillar is still there, but it's like a goo. I don't know what's going on. And over time, here's these little pings. And these little pings, little ping, ping, are these new cells that are trying to form. And initially, the caterpillar's old immune system comes in and crushes them. Foreign cells, stays the goo. But over time, the ping, ping, ping increases until some of the cells make it. And they start forming clusters of wings and legs and eyes. And slowly but slowly, over time, these cells all cluster to form an entirely new structure. The caterpillar doesn't know what's happening. But over time, it starts to get feeling in all these parts of its body and starts moving it and wiggling a little bit, but still caught in the cocoon. And with more effort, with more time, with more inside energy and inspiration, It's finally able to move enough to break free of this cocoon. And suddenly it's in the air. Suddenly it's floating above the earth, looking down at this very small part of what its universe was before, which is the leaves and the other caterpillars still happily munching away. But it's now flying in the sky above all the trees and sees that it hadn't experienced the world before. It was just on leaves. The world is vast. It's infinite. And the caterpillar, far from dying, has just been reborn into what the caterpillar has been all along, was always meant to be, which is the butterfly. And it was an extremely painful experience, but once he's here, it all made sense. And that is a very powerful analogy for what this awakening into awareness or spiritual awakening or whatever we want to call it is that we go through as dying to be alive, as we call it.
And it's a really beautiful story when you think about the butterfly. But when we were talking on our walk, and I want you to understand as you listen that, you know, I've been through this process many times in many different ways. And when I say layer upon layer, I feel like I've done this process many times, but this time it feels very different. And this time, what I'm noticing is that, you know, I've identified myself my whole life with the horizontal plane. And what I mean by that, if you were to imagine the cross, I've identified who I am and what my purpose is in being here with the horizontal or with the interpersonal. And something's happening right now where all of that is sort of pulling away. It feels a little bit like I'm retreating to connect with the vertical, or with, in my words, what I would refer to as God realization, communion, whatever you want to call it, connection with my truest essence. But there's something very bizarre which is happening in that process, which is my purpose is falling away. My sense of meaning in terms of my work and what I've always done, my friendships, my relationships, all of it is changing. And it's changing in a way that I can't quite put my finger on. But what it feels like when I listen to that story is I'm not identifying with a caterpillar. I definitely don't identify with a butterfly in this moment. Where I find myself is in the primordial goo. And I'm laughing. But on our walk, I was crying because it's a really painful place to be, because this whole sense of ego identity in this process has really fallen away. And all of the things that gave me meaning in the past, it's not that they're not meaningful, but they're no longer nourishing my soul in the same way that they did. And what I'm realizing more and more is that those places which I thought were nourishing my soul, in a lot of ways were actually feeding my ego. And in a lot of ways were actually playing out a drama, which fed a really old story, which was, as long as I'm caring for the world, as long as I'm tending to the world, I'm lovable. And as soon as I don't do that, what I'm faced with is questions of, well, who the hell am I? Because now all of those signposts, they're not there anymore. Even, and I mean, I haven't even talked to you about this, but even loving, which is such a significant part of who I am and who I've always been, my ability to love has changed. And what I mean by that is my attachments aren't the same anymore. I've let go of a lot of my attachments. And in letting go of a lot of my attachments, I'm letting go of a lot of enmeshment in love. But without them, love doesn't feel the same. It feels different. I don't even know it in my body anymore. And it's really painful.
What else have you felt letting go of? I mean, before I ask you that question, I want to reflect back to you. You know, in a sense, the way you're describing these attachments, these I do this for this reason, this gives me purpose. That's the, you know, that's the ego structure, or the old caterpillar's body. That's now dying. That's now being let go of to turn into the unknown. What was it? What else for you was part of that old structure that you feel the absence of now?
So I feel it in all of my relationships. I feel it as a parent. I feel it in friendship. I feel it with clients. I feel it with students. I feel it with you. But I think, honestly, the place where it's most painful in this moment is in connection to purpose. And I was thinking about this morning. You know, I've spent so much of my time studying Joseph Campbell's Hero Story and looking at Jane Austen's version of the heroine's journey and whatnot. And I've always really connected with it. But something really interesting happened for me this morning. Is I was watching something actually that you had sent me. And, you know, in the hero story, we talk about the call to adventure, that moment when something comes knocking on your door and there's a call to adventure, a call to take a different path, a call to look at life a different way and to step into your truth. And Campbell always speaks about that as, it's your truth when you're following your bliss. Follow what lights you up. Follow what makes you sparkle. Follow what, when you're doing, time disappears and you could open your eyes and 4 hours could have passed and you could not even know it. I know that really well. I've lived that. This process feels like a letting go of that too, which is really counterintuitive because it's almost like I have to let go of the bliss that I was following in order to connect with something deeper. And it almost feels like what's happening for me in this moment feels like the horizontal plane or the interpersonal plane is falling away for the moment in order for there to be space for me to connect with whatever's truth for me. So for you, it might be the divine, it might be the universe, it might be whatever, to connect with flow. But it's not a process that feels bright and passionate and full of life and vitality. It's a process that feels very much like I'm dying while I'm alive. And, you know, I was talking to my sister this morning and she said something to me like, well, if you want help getting out of there, I can help you. And I was like, God, I'd love to be out of here right now. But I don't think anybody can carry me out or guide me out. I think there's deep wealth and wisdom in this place. And I meant to sort of marinate in it for a while. And it's challenging when people around you are tapping into your sense of purpose. And I feel into your level of vitality around that right now. And I can really feel where I'm not there in the same way that I might have been 5 years ago. And that's also really painful, right? Like to watch the people around you shining and living on purpose, and to be primordial goo in the process.
You know, it's a really interesting way you told that story that makes it, I relate to it in so many ways, but there's this, I don't know, there's a universal law I have now that I've come from my own experience and probably from, you know, reading of others, but that you can't find your new purpose well in any way, shape, or form in the old purpose. At every switch in, I'm just going to call it levels of awareness or consciousness, for lack of a better
You're
explanation.
going to call it
Yeah.
that? Are we
Yeah.
talking about David Hawkins again?
We could.
I'm just
We could be if anything. I mean, I'll come back to it. But as we shift, and a level of consciousness is simply a way in which we see the world. So if we see the world from a place of anger, that's one level of consciousness. If it's a place from peace, it's different. As we move from one to the next, it's whatever meaning we made in the world from that perspective, it's going to be different from the next one. And there's this inevitably this phase of disorientation, depression, despair, and mundaneness as we make that transition, that I don't think it's avoidable. It's just part of the experience. And it's like, it's the hardest thing. And so many people will travel back into the, you know, the old world because it's just too hard to exist in this place of not knowing long enough to allow that new purpose to emerge. Because if you knew what it was, you jump into it. The reality is you don't know what it is. You'll find out, and it'll be wonderful. No one can tell you. You can follow some advice of other people who have done their own journey as to things you can do that'll help you understand it. But it's your journey to take alone, and no one can do it for you.
Yeah.
And the answer is you don't know right now.
Yeah. And being in that place of not knowing is one of the hardest places to be, because it's very easy to get caught up in fear.
Yeah.
And to shut down. And this process is one, as you said, of opening wide. Right? And, you know, we had a friend visiting us this weekend, and she's a lot younger than we are. And she's in recovery, and she's really beautiful and wise. And she was talking to me about how I've been feeling, and I'm becoming more and more comfortable really sharing, which often comes, I'm surprised it hasn't yet here, with tears, because there's a real grief inside of me for what has died. I really like that person.
Well, it's just all it's dying is your entire identity. So,
Yeah.
obviously not surprising, right?
Yeah, but I liked her,
Yeah.
right? And the world liked her too. So it's a very interesting place to be. And I said something to her about, like, I just want to know what my purpose is. I just want to connect with a sense of where I'm meant to go next. And she very wisely, in a way that I won't be able to speak perfectly here, said, well, that's ego too. And I said, what? And she said, the part of you that still wants to know, the part of you that still wants to connect with what that is, that's still your ego holding on. And if you can surrender it, then the divine will be able to work through you and show you. And for those of us that are used to having any level of control over what we do, or any sense of clarity around what step comes next, or what I'm creating next, or what I'm moving into producing next, there's no room for that here. And there's this real place of, can you find the richness in the darkness? I mean, seeds grow in the darkness. It's not until they've gathered enough in the darkness that they sprout forth, right? But for us as humans who live on this plane of producing and recognition and acknowledgement and all the rest of it, being in the darkness feels like primordial goo. And we're not taught much about how to be in this place. And yet, I'm sitting here thinking all of a sudden of Pema Chodron's work, is like her book title, The Wisdom of No Escape. There is no escaping the cocoon for the caterpillar who turns into primordial goo. There is, and if anybody tried, and this story of the caterpillar is one that I find so incredibly powerful, which is, a man comes and sees a caterpillar, it sees a cocoon and sees what's inside of the cocoon pushing and prodding and working in this tiny little hole present where a piece of a wing is trying to push itself out. And he decides he wants to come and help. So he takes some scissors and cuts the cocoon a little bit. Well, what he didn't know was that the struggle of coming out of the cocoon was essential for that caterpillar to become the butterfly, because all of the moisture in the butterfly's wings is let go of through that struggle. And that's what allows the butterfly to fly. But when he cuts the cocoon too early, sorry, the butterfly falls to the ground and dies. And so this place of darkness, of not knowing, is an essential piece of this process. And I think, which is just coming to me now, it's the place in our lives that requires faith to stay in. Yeah.
I mean, there's all these terms for it, but one is the dark night of the soul. For that reason, it's dark, and it's the emergence of the soul. And you made this comment earlier about how we're not taught this part of life, although it seems to be the existentially most important part of life. And the thing is, it's just not part of our mainstream curriculum. Every spiritual teacher throughout the ages have talked to this very one thing. They've prepared us for this absolute one thing that will happen.
I think part of the challenge with spiritual teaching, though, is that for so many, not for all, but so many of the teachers that we look to for guidance in that, so many of them have done that alone in a cave, alone, separate from, disconnected from. And what we're being challenged to do in our society is to do that, as a friend once said to me, in the middle of New York City. Right. Can you sit on a street in the middle of New York City with all of the noise and bustle and hustle, with everybody in their story? And can you do this work anyways?
And I wonder if the answer to that question, and I'm just being playful here, is no, you can't. And that's why the story was always spoken about 40 days in the desert, 3 days in the river, 3 days in the cave. It's always told in, there's this period of time where you need to pull yourself away from the old identity, from the old system, from the old sort of conventional wisdom as a way to transform. Because if you don't, it's going to be so confusing and pull you back that the transformation won't be complete. I don't know if that's true, but in the way you describe it, there are aspects of it. There may be a period of you need to withdraw a little bit into yourself.
So I think that's 100% true.
Yeah.
And I definitely know that retreat in my own body right now. But as a householder, as a mother, as somebody who's involved in the community, we don't have the luxury of going into the cave, but we do have to learn how to create space and quiet for us to be able to do this process and still be in this world.
Yeah, it's a metaphorical cave, but yes. But with that, why don't we pause there, and we'll come back and explore the cave in the after the break.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Welcome to Shanti Mission, a school for the soul. If you're seeking personal transformation, deeper spiritual awareness, sacred music, or the support of a welcoming community, Shanti Mission offers signature workshops and healing programs in a warm and inclusive space, designed for growth and connection. For more information and to access free resources, visit shantimission.org. Together we can anchor peace.
Want a speaker who can inspire your audience and keep them laughing and learning all in the same moment? I'm Erica Gummany, and that's exactly what I hope to do when blending personal stories, deeper spiritual insights, and practical wisdom with a whole lot of humor that keeps everyone engaged. My intention is to create safe, transformative spaces where real growth and connection happen. Book me to speak or facilitate something amazing at yourpivotalpoint.com.
Tune in to Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living with me, Jacqueline.
And me, Chris, on Transformation Talk Radio, every second and fourth Monday at 3 p.m.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and to heal, and how to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Witness the field of potential that arises when you take personal responsibility and become the divine creator in your own life.
Visit theway-healing.com for more information.
There is more to life than simply surviving or even thriving. There's flourishing. High performance and quantum success coach Beth Larson helps you calibrate and elevate your life. Beth specializes in working with women who want more from their life, more energy, joy, passion, connection, and more meaning. As your coach, she will help you get clear about your life, prioritize what's important, and become a master of your energy. Visit BethLarsonCoaching.com.
Join us on Kaleidoscope for Becoming every second Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific Time on Transformation Talk Revolution, where you are invited to revel in your becoming better and brighter on purpose. This isn't just a show, it's a prayer disguised as a podcast, and together we are evolving on purpose. Visit www.celestialempowerment.com for more information.
All right, we're back. Yeah, I got a question, comment from Roy in the chat. I'm going to read part of it, and just I want to thank Roy and everyone else who's been sort of participating in the last few episodes. Like it's great to have these. I also relate to the impatience of wanting to have more control or know what's next. I've been a higher achiever my whole life, and wanting and just being is a challenge for me. I'm going to tackle that one because I can really relate to that. When I went into this place, for sure, like I was 100% an uber higher achiever in the world. I like to control my environment. I was good at making things happen. I was very much identified with being a doer and identified with all these sort of trappings of the manifest world. And the hardest part for me was just fully surrendering and letting go of the need to know, and the need to know what was next. And it took a while of practice, but I guess the way to describe this is, I think just as a top-down process of just telling ourselves, okay, need to let go, need to be different, need to live my life an entirely different way than the way I was going to live. It's almost impossible as a mental exercise. And I think I've shared this in this podcast before. I dove deeply into a somatic type of exercises for an extended period of time as I went through this process of yoga, meditation, prayer, breath work, reading spiritual literature as a way to work from the bottom up. And in this, I can't explain how it worked or why it worked. It really allowed my mind to relax and facilitated the process of letting go of needing to know what was next and needing to know what the future looked like. It got me into this place of recognizing that actually what I was moving into, it's called the great mystery for a reason. I don't know the answers to it, and I don't need to know. In fact, I don't want to know. But it took several years, going back to our metaphorical cave, before I started to get any real clarity of what my future path is going to look like. I had in there just let go of the need for it to look anything like the past path I'd been on.
Yeah. I can also really relate to the statement or the pondering. And I think a part of what happens as we enter this place of primordial goo, just become my new favorite term, is that what we identified as high achievement becomes tied to smaller stories about who we were. The high achievement doesn't hold the same value anymore. It's shifted. We can see it for what it was. And so going back into that is almost impossible from this place. What happens in this process of sort of hanging out in the unknown is this place of watching. My dear friend Haley actually spoke to it earlier today. It's like your soul is dragging your human through the mud and your human is kicking and screaming, right? Because the human doesn't like to be in a place of not knowing. And it definitely doesn't love to be in a place of not doing when doing is the only way that it's known its self-worth, its self-value, its purpose in the world. But in being in that place, the only way that the human can actually relax is by surrendering and allowing itself to be pulled in a particular direction, which I think if I really go back to Joseph Campbell's work, that's what he was really speaking to, was the call of the soul. Right? It wasn't about following the thing you were doing, but it was following the whispers of the soul. And the only way to hear those whispers is to get into a place of quiet. And the interesting thing is that in some ways, as we let go of all of these high achieving, doing kind of behaviors, what we recognize is this place of not doing, of just being, it's far louder in a lot of ways because we can finally hear the voices that we were trying to quiet. And what we experience is this void in some ways. You know, all of our doings are dopamine hits. And in this place that feels, at times, I mean, sometimes it feels very rich. Sometimes it feels really vapid. There's not a lot of dopamine hits. I notice, man, did I notice over the last month, this real desire to like disappear into TV or disappear into a book and completely disengage from this place because it's too uncomfortable. And then this awareness that, well, that's just my human kicking and screaming. And the only thing that it's going to do is prolong this place because unfortunately, you said some people will just go back to their old ways. My experience throughout my life has been that as these moments happen, once you're awake, you can't go back to sleep. Not really. Not without muting or numbing. You can't really go back to sleep once you've become a butterfly and you're looking out over the world. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. What you caught on to is for the Joseph Campbell's The Whispering of the Soul. I caught on to the slaying of the dragon, right? And it's the same part of the story. It's like, you know, a big part of the hero's journey is, the knight slays the dragon. That there dragon is guarding the treasure. Well, the dragon's the ego, the treasure's the identity. It's the part of us that's needing to die for the soul to fully emerge. And a good, coming back into the mental aspect of it is we're not looking to replace an old identity with a new identity. It's the end of the identity. And that's what's so hard about it. It's not like, okay, I'm going to be this character that does these things. It's being replaced with a way of being, which transcends identity because it's a beingness in the world. And it's very, very different. And that's the ego death that we're talking about. And so again, we're looking for like, this is my old identity, what's the new one going to be? It's like just replacing the dragon. And it even makes me, think like, when this sort of journey goes awry, it's often, how many times have we heard about a spiritual teacher that has this massive fall from grace because guess what? They've assumed the identity of a spiritual teacher. And it's no different than assuming the identity of the Wall Street trader. It just has a different cloak on and it's told itself a different maladaptive story, but it's just an identity again. So it's almost like the butterfly tried to turn back into a caterpillar, like goes the other way in some respects.
Yeah. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about two things. So I'm going to speak to the first one first, which is that last week, I'm not really on social media very much. I think that's sort of this place of, in your original quote, where it just becomes not very interesting anymore. But I was on social media and I saw something that if you looked up on Instagram, actually, if you looked up on Google, the most touching insurance ad, I think you'd find this particular piece. And it's this really beautiful, it's a video of a man who notices a plant dying on his way to work and puts it under, what do you call it? Like when water comes down.
Like a water spout.
Yeah. Puts it under a water spout, and he sees a woman and her daughter on the street begging for money for her daughter to get an education. And he sees an old woman pushing a cart. And in each moment, he chooses to serve. And they're very, very simple, very small gestures that he repeats every day on his way to work. And you see the impact that has on the people that he's touching emotionally. Some of them are very small and some of the impacts are very big. But I watched it and I was brought to tears watching it because what I recognized was, oh, that's all that matters now. Right? All that matters now is that you find a way to be in service, but in small gestures, not in the grand, I'm on stage doing something, not in the, oh, wow, the whole world is acknowledging me for something, but in the invisible ways that most people don't ever see, because that's true meaning. And I was really, really struck by the simplicity of the message and how deeply it touched this soul, who is definitely dragging a human kicking and screaming in this moment. The other thing I wanted to share is, I'm a teacher. And to be in a position where I'm experiencing this really deep struggle internally, and to hold the capacity to be as transparent as I can be with the people who are in my environment feels really important, because it feels like an invitation to be able to explore together. It also feels really important because my ego would tell me, you have no business teaching if you're sitting in this place. If you haven't moved through this place, you shouldn't be teaching anybody anything. You don't know. And there's this piece of me that wakes up when I hear that voice that says, well, isn't this what teaching is all about? I remember, and I don't know if I told this story on another podcast, but I remember there was a woman that used to sit in my yoga classes when I taught in the city, much older than me, who came up to me one day. She kept inviting me to her class. It was a spirituality class, and I kept saying thank you, but I'm good. And then one day she came up to me and asked for help, and asked if I would sit with her, more as a therapist than anything else. And I remember thinking on my way there, I'm such a baby in comparison. What could I possibly know that could help her? And then realize, like, that's your ego. She's asking for help. So step into serving her. And I sat with her, and she came undone in my arms. And I remember the feeling that I had in that moment. And the feeling was, oh, now I want to come to your classes. I want to sit with you. Because your capacity to unwind is teaching me that to be in your presence is to be in the process of unwinding our humanity, not hiding it, not pretending it away, not sitting on some stage needing to be ahead of, more knowledgeable than, transmitting something that I've arrived at that I can now share, but rather sitting with, being with, growing with, unbecoming with. And that felt incredibly powerful and significant. And when you're going through it, it doesn't feel great. But I really do think this is the place where wisdom comes from.
Well, I think it's precisely, we've talked about this in the podcast. It's the only thing we have to teach. The only thing we have to share that's of any value to anyone is our own experience. Everything else is just nonsense we've gathered from books or from a broken system that, and I believe Alan Watts' world that is full of manipulation and propaganda and tired formulas that we don't know, or I don't know what truth is in there, but I know the truth in my own experience. And I trust in that. Many of these, teachers before that have just spoke about their own experience and said, just follow me. Here's what I've done, take it or leave it. That's truth. That's true teaching. And so anyone that's, in your sphere, that's, privileged enough to be in contact with you as you're going through this thing, is getting the most profound teaching in the world as you share your experience in real time with them. That is truth. That is knowledge. That's the kind of stuff that actually changes the world. Not having gone through it and then, crafting a story that sounds like it's interesting. That's just that's a different level of consciousness than I am in this. I will share this, and I will let the vibrational frequency of whatever's happening to me happen to you. I think that is the definition of a spiritual teacher.
Maybe, yeah. I would really encourage any of you that are moving through something similar. It'll look different for all of us. Either through, if there's people in your community, if there's a teacher that you are really drawn to, if there are books that really pull you in, to find a way to be able to share what's happening for you. I know for myself that in sharing, a lot of what's been happening for me has been very much hidden from view, and partly because it needs to be, in order for that transformation to happen. But I hit a point where it was really, I could feel myself retreating, and not just retreating into me, but retreating away from people that I love, hiding, if you will, from people that I feel really connected to because I don't really want to be seen in this place. And I felt this real point where it was like, okay, Jack, now you have to reach out to say, hey, this is what's on my plate right now. I'm sitting in this place of primordial goo, and I want to be seen in this place, not to be celebrated or acknowledged, but so that it can be known that this is where I am, so that you can meet me here. The weight that I was carrying around being here really began to fall away, and my nervous system really quieted as a few people in my sphere that I really trust could say, actually, it wasn't their words, it was just their presence, could hear me and not turn away from me when part of my human wanted nothing to do with me.
Can you, I'm curious, in these conversations, was there differentiation? Was there people that could hear and the people that couldn't? And were there people that you said, I don't think they can hear me, so I'm not going to have this conversation? How do you navigate that?
I think you navigate it with your intuition, and you reach out to people that you think will hear you. And sometimes it'll be hit and miss. But for me, some of the beauty in this process is that I reached out to one friend who isn't in this world so much. She's beautiful in her own right, but she's not really doing the same kind of thing that I'm doing. And she probably had some of the deepest wisdom to give me. I was sharing something with her about really leaning into this teacher and learning a lot. And she said something to me like, hey, do you think maybe you need to slow down a little bit? Do you think maybe it'd be okay if you actually just marinated where you are right now? I know it's uncomfortable, but maybe this process is not meant to be hurried. Maybe this process takes time. And I actually felt incredibly grateful for having the courage to bring it up with somebody who might not meet me in it, because there was wisdom there too, if I was willing to hear it.
Yeah. And it's interesting, just because you brought it up, it's like there's these common features that we've identified of the primordial goo phase. And the one you identified is this one of like wanting to learn it all, like wanting to bring in all these teachers and information and whatnot. And this friend stepped in and said, okay, maybe from a different perspective, is that serving you? As you digested that, how can you make sense of all we're talking about here, and that maybe it is a good idea to slow down, or potentially a good idea to slow down?
Way back when I was in Chinese medical school, a teacher of mine said something that I thought about also this morning that you're bringing up, which is he was trying to teach me the same thing. I think speeding up is kind of my gig. It's my default mode. And slowing down is my teacher. And he said to me, Jacqueline, you can't rush a fruit to ripen. And, at the time I heard him and I sort of got it, but in time, you can't force an orange to be ripe and juicy and ready. It gets ripe and juice and ready in its own timing, in sunlight, in time. And we're the same. There's a season, right? There's a season for us to be ripening quickly, and there's a season for us to be hibernating and going really quiet. And sometimes we're in season. I think I'm a little bit out of season because we're moving into spring, and I still feel very much in fall and winter. But I think that the surrendering to that knowing, right? That there's a season for everything, and that, excuse me, thanks. The only constant in life is change. And sometimes we feel like life is stagnant, but sometimes it's in that place of what seems stagnant that we're gathering enough energy to be able to then step through a new door. Yeah. And we need to get uncomfortable to change.
Yeah. And I know we're running out of time here. I want to address that time and patience aspect in terms of cycles. Even it goes back to Roy's question. When we come out of the sort of this sort of manic hurly-burly world, we want things to happen quickly. But we do move in cycles, and I've really come to appreciate that. I'm a newbie to this space. I've been in it about 7 years, 7-year cycle, particularly for men. I know better, but the clock started reset on me at 49, the 7th year into my 7th year cycle. The whole my whole world fell apart, and I went into the cocoon. And I tried to drink from a fire hose to rush it at the start, and doing all this yoga and stuff like that. And then somewhere in there, I realized I just got to back the hell off this thing, let it happen. And here I am turning 56 this year, the next 7th year. And it's like I realized I'm where I'm meant to be. And it didn't matter a whole lot what I did in there, except just have the patience to ride this thing out. And I don't know what the next 7 years will be, but it'll be a lot more patience in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was the old identity, wanting to do it quickly, and not so much anymore.
Yeah. Wow. I think that's a really beautiful place, actually, for us to end. Patience, patience, especially in a society that feeds itself on the quickest dopamine hits that we can get, is a challenging one to cultivate, but it's essential. And if we look to nature, which I do in most of my work, we'll know that nature is patient. There is no rushing. And when nature rushes, like a flower comes out of the ground and it's February, oftentimes a frost hits and that flower needs to go back to rest before it can come into being again. And we're very much the same. Anyways, thank you for being here, and thanks for listening to something that isn't always easy to share, but we thought it was really important to share with you. If you have any questions, you know how to find us.
Thanks. See you in a couple weeks.
You've been listening to me, Chris.
And me, Jacqueline, on
Monday at 3 p.m. on Transformation Talk Radio for more real conversations about life, death, and everything in between.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and heal, how to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Through healthy conversations between the feminine and the masculine, you will learn how to harness the power of relationship and the mirror to befriend your shadow, and to trust that any obstacle that gets in your way is there to help you grow.
For more information or to connect with us personally, visit theway-healing.com. That's theway-healing.com.